Hello, I'm Selena Hill, Deputy Digital Editor at Black Enterprise, and welcome to the Resources and Strategies to Boost Black Home Ownership session. The need for Black Americans to focus on wealth creation has never been more crucial. Although there are opportunities to build wealth through investing and strategic business ownership, home ownership has historically been the #1 way for families and individuals to build wealth in the US, as it is typically the largest single asset they own. Home ownership may also be the single most important asset to set the foundation in building generational wealth. However, the fact that Black home ownership rates drastically lag behind that of white Americans is a significant factor in the racial wealth gap. In fact, there has never been a time in history where a majority of Black Americans were homeowners. Today, the Black home ownership rate hovers closer to 44%, while the white ownership rate is at approximately 74%. So during this session, our experts will share tips, tools, and insight to learn smart strategies and resources to succeed as a homeowner, whether you're a first-time buyer or looking to upgrade to a new or even second property. I'll start by introducing our prestigious panel, starting with AJ Barkley, who is the Neighborhood Lending Executive at Bank of America, and Cerita Battles, who is the Managing Director, Head of Affordable Lending at JP Morgan Chase. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I want to start the conversation talking about COVID, right? And how COVID has actually changed the market. What would you say is different about the housing market now?
From my perspective, I would say that I didn't see much difference in the housing market. I would say that homes were still selling, people were still buying, and folks were still refinancing because it was a market or a time where rates were still low. And so you still saw that. However, I would say within the Black community, I think there was a little bit of stifling where people took a step back just to kind of pay attention to the environment around them. You had a lot of unemployment and underemployment during that time frame. You had a lot of different things that were going on where from a mindset perspective, I think that there was this time where we kind of stayed still. I would also say that for those of us that stayed still, there was also this opportunity to kind of get some bearings and learn more around homeownership. And I give one example. During that time frame, I had a niece that decided to sell her home, her townhome, and purchase a new home, and it was a new construction. And that was a time that she leveraged to learn a little bit more about the process, seek to gain some insights and knowledge by Googling, by asking questions, asking her auntie some things, so on and so forth. But during that time frame, she actually decided to sell her home, which she did, and then purchase a new one, which is new construction. So I would say for some, it might have been a little bit stifling because we wanted to see how the market would kind of bounce back from that. And I think for others, it was an opportunity to kind of get into the game and do some things that they probably weren't thinking about before, but because the market was rich and rates were low, still took advantage of the marketplace.
AJ, and definitely we want you to chime in. I read that Black millennials actually have seen an uptick in buying homes as opposed to any other generation when it comes to Black Americans. What is your assessment of the home ownership market now? Do you agree with Cerita, or do you think it's more challenging for Black Americans?
Well, I agree with what Cerita said, just in general, back to the COVID situation. I think it depended on where you were in the journey of home ownership, which indicated how much you continued to move forward or you paused. And so if you've been saving, for reserves, for down payments and closing costs, you were used to just trying to get over the hurdle. You were used to saving. And if you were close enough despite COVID, you moved forward, barring a situation where you could get in your property and have the properties inspected and all of the things that happened early on when the pandemic started, where the market was stifled a little bit or slowed down, not because the houses weren't for sale, not because of the rates weren't good. All the stuff Cerita said is absolutely accurate, but literally being able to do the end-to-end lending process was somewhat paused for a short period of time. But there are people that were just almost there, like literally 2 months out from having the savings amount, and COVID did not stop them. If they had a property in mind, they were already lending, they were there. I agree with Cerita also that people who were starting to think, do I think I can own a home? Is it time for me to get a home? I'm not sure if I'm ready. They had an opportunity to do exactly what she said. They had an opportunity to speak to people they trusted. They had an opportunity to use tools and resources to become more educated. And then those people that were not affected from an employment perspective, they found themselves spending less on discretionary items, perhaps, and doing without. And so it may have energized their savings. And so I think it depended on where you were in the spectrum of the housing or the sales process or the home buying process. In terms of millennials are, we're still trying to get themselves together after what happened in 2008 to 2011. And that paused them a little bit in terms of the housing market. I think what we learned from that time and what Black millennials specifically have learned is it is important that you think about sustained home ownership and you think about your preparation for home ownership. So they might not have been ready before, or they saw some of what happens when you weren't totally ready and you didn't have enough cash for emergencies and you didn't think about your ability to repay longer term, or you just didn't have enough cash for reserves because the water heater goes. A lot of things happen when you purchase a home. I think they are much more educated. They've started to make different decisions around their, again, discretionary spend. I think that's happening across the country. And they realized and are realizing faster than what they did before that it is sometimes cheaper in many cases to own a home than it is to rent. And just the stability of home ownership in terms of what you pay month over month over month has been extremely beneficial. And then the whole point of us having this discussion is they understood that they could start to build wealth and a legacy for their family. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things with millennials.
Mm-hmm.
Cerita, how would someone know that they're ready to buy a home, especially in this market?
Yeah, and I think each individual person is different. I always like to say a person that is planful, right? I think the statement that we often hear, if you plan to fail, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So I think those that are more planful will probably have a little bit more confidence in their ability to be able to purchase, especially during this environment. And so again, I think it gets back to everything that we said earlier on, is the more that you take the time to be intentional about your purchase or about what you want to do the research. Make sure that you surround yourself with people or with advisors that can give you good insights around this. Because I think we do a lot of that when we plan to purchase any other thing. Like, I often think, like, for instance, if I'm thinking of purchasing a car, all of the planning that goes into that, how you Google, you look it up, you look at what's in the engine, you look at all of the features that you get, you look at all of these different things, you look at the price points, you try to understand if I can get this car cheaper somewhere, if I buy it from the actual maker of the car, if I buy it directly from like a specific car dealership versus buying it from someone else. You think about all of those different things and you put all of that into your planning process. How much is it going to cost me monthly, so on and so forth. And I know the game because I've been through it before when I think about buying my especially when I'm purchasing cars. You do all of this different research. Well, home ownership is the same way, where you have to kind of start thinking about, like, what can I afford? How much can I afford from a house perspective? Where do I want to buy? Do I want a single family home? Do I want a condo? Do I want to start off with something smaller, or do I want to have something with a yard that I got to take care of, so on and so forth? And so you start to think about all of those different things, and you start to research for homes and things of that nature that kind of feed up into what you're looking for. Then you start looking at those price points. And there are so many different tools out there that folks can use, online tools that will tell you how much home you can afford based on your income and all of those different things. There's a level of research that one can do that's self-directed and self-guided, but it does not take the place of getting some solid insights from your bankers, loan officers, those that are in the industry that can tell you about products and programs that are available for you, that you can leverage in order to make sure that you have the down payment assistance or the closing cost assistance to be able to purchase a home. And so I would go back to saying, just do your research, make sure that you're planful around that, because homeownership, that's probably one of the biggest purchases that one would ever have, is purchasing a home. And so you want to make sure that you do everything that you need to make sure that you're making a sound decision around those purchases. So again, I go back to this simple thing, and sometimes it seems so simple, but it's the one thing that we don't do enough of. And that is just really being planful about your purchase, being very intentional about what it is that you want, how you want it, how you want to make sure that you're able to pay for it. You want to make sure that you're planful in that research.
You know, Cerita, I was just thinking about what you just said. And one of the things I would add, and I'm sure your experience has been the same, I think it depends on, Selena, you just asked the question around millennials, right? And if you think about it, some people think that they're too ashamed to ask the question. They think because they are of a certain age and a certain life experience that they're supposed to know all of this stuff about home ownership. They're supposed to know all this stuff about planning, all of the things that Cerita talked about that you should be thinking of. And so they choose not to ask. They choose not to seek guidance. They choose not to look for someone that is a trusted advisor because they're afraid to ask the question. They don't even know necessarily what question to ask. And so I would stress the point you're making around being planful. But I think you have got to get yourself a trusted advisor, some places you can ask the questions. And the beauty of some of the things that Cerita talked about, like tools and resources, you can do those things in the convenience of your own home. So if you feel like you're somewhat exposed and you don't want to ask a lot of questions, you can do so much of that research. And then in this current market, it's extremely competitive. So you have to go do the research so you're prepared. There are many cases, depending on the home, depending on the location and the price point, there could be 30 people vying for that same property. So the more you know in terms of being prepared, whether you're pre-qualified is one thing versus being pre-approved, which means you've been underwritten to some extent by an underwriter, which puts you in a better position if a seller's looking at 3 offers and someone's just pre-qualified and you're pre-approved, it's a different experience. And so getting all that information, understanding all of that will put you in the right place. And Cerita, you said it well, you have got to be planful and you've got to figure out who you go to that you trust. And I think the lending specialist, wherever your financial institution is, like you said, makes so much sense. But ask the question. People are so afraid to ask the question. It could be the difference in you creating a legacy for your family and for you beginning to build wealth. Extremely important.
Absolutely. And AJ, I would even say, I think it's one of those things where we have to be vulnerable to subject matter experts. I mean, oftentimes we don't want to go in and talk about, what we don't know or how we don't know this about this thing or so on and so forth. This is typically not a discussion that we would have around the dinner table either, especially with our parents growing up, so on and so forth. There are several of us that come from a generation of renters, and we've rented very well. We've stayed in places, and we can even recall staying in some homes, but didn't know that our parents were renting the home versus owning the home. And so it's not something that we discuss around the dinner table, but there is one thing that we do discuss, and that is just paying our bills on time. And so when we think about the planning, don't underestimate how important it is to make sure that you just start off by making sure that you pay your bills on time, making sure that you do the things that are necessary. Get past paying the minimum payments and try to pay a little bit more to put yourself on the path of homeownership, or on the path of just being able to have a little bit of legacy wealth, where we don't talk about that often around our dinner tables, but it's the one thing that kind of keeps us afloat. I remember having a discussion with one of my leaders. It was actually probably some 15 or 16 years ago. And I can remember I was talking to this underwriting manager that wasn't a minority, but he was just talking to me about when we go through times of change or pandemics and things of that nature. The one thing that keeps us afloat is when we have the opportunity to have a home, something that we can call our own. Because again, you can find things, you can eat different types of foods. Like he was talking about how you can eat rice, you can have some grits, you can have some beans, you can have those types of things, but it's nothing like having your own when you have a roof over your head and you're not concerned about somebody kicking you out or somebody else not being able to pay the bill or the mortgage that you're renting from. And so again, just making sure that we put ourselves in position to have that level of ownership, to have that level of preparation, so that we can put ourselves in the best possible position to take care of ourselves and our families and create what AJ said, which is really that legacy wealth that we seek to make sure that we have for our families.
Absolutely. And I know that you've both mentioned working with a financial advisor or a financial institution. AJ, can you talk about some of the advantages that come with actually working with a bank when it comes to purchasing a home?
Well, a couple things. There's mortgage companies and there's banks. So thank you for asking the question. Mortgage companies typically just do mortgages. If you work with your financial institution, think about it like where you have your checking account and savings account. They typically have lending as well and have lending specialists. And if you think about that's where your primary relationship is. This is where you have your direct deposit. You already have an established relationship. You know, some financial institutions, there's benefits of getting your mortgage. There's discounts related to getting your mortgages depending on your depository relationship. There's also specialists there that can help you end to end. They can also help you if you're not quite ready. If you're working with an organization where where you have your depository relationship, they can help you get there. They can help you plan for this life priority, which is home ownership. They can help you save. They can give you opportunities to think more about your credit. You heard Cerita talking about pay more than your minimum due. There may be, you may be able to refinance your auto loan that you currently have at a lower rate. And that means those funds then can be swept into a savings account. So again, you're starting to build for your reserves for closing costs and down payment. So if you go to someone that you trust, and again, it could be an institution that you go to today to say, look, I am really starting to think about home ownership. What are the things I need to do? They're going to help you. I don't know of a financial institution that would not give you and get you along your way around saving, planning, as Cerita has talked about, and getting ready. The other thing that happens is when you work with someone that you have an established relationship with, they can help you with some of the urban myths. So, Cerita, you've heard it all. You and I both have, right? Like you have to have 20% down to get in a home. That is not true necessarily. That you can't have student loans to get in a home. And so the other reason you want to go to someone, and again, in a place that you trust already, is a great place to start, is they can help you with those urban myths so you can hear what's more contemporary in lending. They can help you with what you may be eligible for in terms of grants. You heard Cerita mention down payment grants and closing cost grants. They can talk to you about what might be eligible in the community that you're in. So there's so much. And when you go to a specialist, they are trained. They can help you with what's the right product, lending product. Is it a 3% down product or is it something else? And so all you need to do is to go in and say, I'm ready, I'm thinking. And even if you're not quite ready, they'll give you the tools and resources to get you well on your way. The other thing I would mention is if I think about my dinner table, I know, Cerita, we talked about this the other day. We didn't spend time talking about home ownership. We didn't even spend a lot of time talking about savings at our dinner table. It was an assumption, growing up. And so even if you're not ready for the home for a year from now or 2 years from now, whatever the situation is, if you start to change the behavior of what should happen and your kids start to see it or your grandkids start to see saving is important, paying more than your minimum due on your credit card, doing things different with your credit, doing things to demonstrate your ability to repay, it actually already helps our kids at a very young age think about how you manage money and what you do with money, because then you start to build, again, they start to think about their legacy. They could be homeowners at 20 years old. You just don't know. And so the planning, so even if you're not quite ready, when you start to change what happens at your dinner table and the discussions that you're having, you're planning the seed for future legacies, again, could be niece, uncle, nephew, grandchild, whatever it is. So it's important to have those conversations. Again, they start with perhaps your financial institution, but everybody wants to help. We are anxious. I know our two organizations are very anxious to help people realize the power of sustained home ownership, and we are all committed to that.
Absolutely.
Cerita, can you actually talk about how your institution is helping first-time homeowners, particularly those of color, and also those who may be wanting to refinance at this time?
Yeah, so AJ talked about this. We have a lot of different tools and resources to be able to support people from a home ownership perspective. We have tools such as Credit Journey. And so if you're looking to at least build your credit up to a certain score, or whatever the case may be, we have some self-guided tools that you can leverage to be able to do that. We have a financial health team. This team is dedicated specifically to be able to support you in your financial health journey. We often talk about financial literacy, and then we talk about financial health. Financial literacy is you knowing what you need to do. I like to think about it like when you think about eating food and you're trying to lose weight. You know the right foods to eat. You know the certain amount of vegetables you have to eat, fruits you have to eat, bread, so on and so forth. And so that's you knowing and having the knowledge of what needs to happen from a financial perspective. But financial health is the application. So how do you apply the tools and the resources that you have to your own situation? So we do have a team of folks that are there to support you in your financial journey. In addition to that, AJ talked about loan officers that we have. We do have home lending advisors that are there to get you on your way. So the minute you say that you're ready or you're thinking about home ownership, they're going to definitely work to put you on your path. So there are lots of different products and programs that can be leveraged to get into a home and to refinance a home. So it's not just on the purchase side of the business where you're purchasing a home, but you might be looking to refinance an existing home that you have. I always like to tell my stories. Oftentimes we think about refinancing your loans. I can remember I've been in my home for about 10 or 11 years. And just recently, we were having a conversation about the lack of Blacks refinancing and why we weren't taking advantage of the low interest rate environment. And I thought to myself, I'm talking on this and I'm talking about how, we want to make sure our payment is right. And if our payment is in the right place, we're probably not thinking about that. And then I realized I hadn't refinanced my house in 10 or 11 years. And I thought about that for a quick second. And then I asked myself the question, why had I not taken advantage of the interest rate environment and the fact that I'm even in the mortgage business? And I thought very candidly about it. I was very, my rate or my mortgage payment was in a safe space where I liked it. It wasn't a problem for my family and I to be able to make that payment, or even if one of us lost our job, we would still be able to make that payment. And so in my mind, I didn't even want to mess with that cushion. I felt that it was good, it was in the right place, and I didn't want to mess with it. But at the same time, I missed an opportunity to lower my rate and lower my payment so that it would even be even better for me and my family to be able to do so. So it's always an opportunity for you to always be thinking about those next moves, whether you're purchasing a home or whether you're refinancing a home, but always being able to think about what are the best ways you can put yourself in a great position to be able to establish that generational wealth that we all look for and desire, not just for ourselves, but then for our children and our children's children and so on and so forth, so that they understand the importance of home ownership and how they can leverage home ownership in order to build that nest egg for their family to come. And so again, a lot of different tools and resources that we have. But again, it starts first with the conversation, just basically saying, I'm either ready or I'm thinking about. That starts the conversation piece. And it's also good to be able to do that definitely with the financial institution that you already have a relationship with, so that they can create that know me or know you experience, because they have all of the information right there in front of their fingertips. And so therefore they should be able to help you along your path.
AJ, so Sarita, I really like when Sarita talked about the opportunity she missed personally to refinance her home and to lower that mortgage rate. What tools and resources does your institution give so that folks aren't missing these opportunities, especially those in our community?
Yeah, so we have what we call Life Plan. And it is an opportunity for you, again, in the convenience of your own home. If you think about today's environment, you don't necessarily have to go in and physically visit with a specialist. You can meet with them virtually, or you can be online and do it as a self-service function. But we have what we call Life Plan, and you get to determine what your priorities are. It could be anything. It could be home ownership, it could be vacation, it could be retirement. And once you select what that life plan priority is for you, we then help you to start mapping how to get there. And it starts with, how do I spend my money? How am I saving? And is my money working hard enough for me? Is home ownership important to me? When do I want to purchase a home? Am I in a position to purchase a home? And so we have, first time home buyer education series, which are online. They're in a language, so they're in English and Spanish. We also have what we call Better Money Habits, very similar to what Cerita mentioned, which is really around financial acumen. Like, things have changed. And for you to just sit back and assume what you heard maybe at the dinner table 20 years ago, even what you believe 5 years ago, in terms of how you could be prepared for whatever unexpected emergencies or whatever, Better Money Habits helps. And the other thing about it that I think is really important is you can start really young. Our Better Money Habits program literally goes down to grade school and high school. So really trying to understand money at a young age is extremely important. And being able to have those conversations, what I call in kitchen English, so people can understand it and it's not so overwhelming. So there's lots and lots of tools. I also think, again, both of our institutions have down payment programs and closing cost programs in terms of home ownership. I think it's really important when you go to whatever institution you're going to, whether it's a financial institution or mortgage company, ask the questions. And that's why you want to work with somebody you trust to get underneath the details. Our down payment program and closing cost program for home ownership is you don't have to repay it back. You do not repay the funds back. It's a grant. It's a proprietary grant. And I think it's important when you're talking to people around making this huge purchase of a home, which can be complicated and overwhelming, that you ask the right questions. And so you do want to say, well, what does this mean? Can you tell me more? Does it have to be repaid? Is there taxes? So you want to ask a lot of questions, and don't be afraid to ask that. But many, many tools. I would stress, and I think Cerita has stressed this, take advantage of everything your financial institution has today. You should go in or call and say, tell me everything that is available to me to be a better financial steward of my money as I build a legacy for my family, because there's multiple things. And we don't do that enough. As you talked about us being Black African Americans, we don't take advantage of that. I think some of that is rooted in, I know at least when I grew up, everything's private. Like, you didn't talk about a lot of things. We kept a lot of things close to the chest. We kept things in our house. And so we've got to break out, because there are things out there that can help us. And we have to get comfortable in the right environment to have those conversations. And so I just say, start there, start where you bank. And if you don't feel comfortable, go to someone else that, may be able to support you, and just ask the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Cerita, what would you tell your 25-year-old self about home ownership?
First off, just that, again, I get back to just the planning of it, and just making sure that you're just well positioned. When I was 25 years old, I wasn't even thinking about owning a home, at the time. I was just really thinking about, what job am I going to get, after college, trying to make sure that I was just really focused on my career. But it's interesting that as you're thinking about your career, it's almost like you got to do it simultaneously. Like, you got to think about where you want to be in life, and how you want to go about doing it, because you always need a place to stay. And I think oftentimes we think so much about, apartment living, so on and so forth. And you got it now so today, where even from an apartment standpoint, you have all of these amenities that you get from an apartment living type of thing, where you have amenities, you have concierge, you have all of these different things at your fingertips that some people don't want to give up when you're going into owning a home. Because with owning a home, not only do you have the benefits of looking at this and saying, this is mine, and I get to paint it, do all these different things the way in which I want it to be. I get to add some additional things here. I get to do stuff with my yard, so on and so forth. I mean, there are so many different benefits in it, but I would tell you that that's not a story that we were talking about back when I was 25 years old. It was just really about your career. But I think today, at least with a lot of the millennials, I'm a Gen Xer, that there's a lot more conversations that are going on about just where am I looking and choosing to live? Like, where do I want to plant myself? So that as I'm working, as I'm building out my career, I'm also in an environment that means me well, where I can establish myself as someone in the community that's supporting the community, or I can establish myself as someone being newly married, so on and so forth, that I have this ability to establish myself in the right way. I will tell you that when I did get married, I married someone who had a home and was able to take advantage of being in the military and doing a VA loan where they got certain benefits. And he took advantage of that as soon as he got out of the military, took advantage of home ownership. And as a result of that, it's interesting that I wasn't really focused on buying a home, but I was definitely looking to marry someone that was in that space and definitely benefited from that. And as a result of him being able to create that level of stability, then once we kind of got together, there was an opportunity for us to build upon what he had already established. And so again, it's very important to just be thinking about those things in conjunction with your career, because usually at 25 years of age, that's what we're focused on, is just trying to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do in order to get our career established, and not necessarily thinking about where am I going to lay my head. And I think we need to be thinking about both and make sure that we're preparing ourselves for future legacy wealth, home ownership growth, all of those different things that we should be planning for, because eventually we will be a part of a family. You definitely want to make sure that you have those foundations in place.
AJ, same question. What would you tell your 25-year-old self about home ownership?
Yeah, so I got married at 25, and like Cerita, I wasn't necessarily thinking about home ownership. I was the same. I think it was, I don't know how old I am compared to Cerita, so I won't date myself here, but it literally, well, I just turned 56, I'll tell you. So I just remember years ago, I was thinking career, right? Because it was around aspiring to be the best you, and it was, and I remember Cerita thinking about the pool, like what did the weight room look like, and what did all the amenities, I had carpeting and the stairs. Like, I was so in awe of my first apartment with my husband and all the things that we did. And I think that I would, if I could do it now, what I would tell you is happening now for 25-year-olds. We did a survey, gosh, about a year or so ago, 18 to 23, 24, 25-year-olds, and they are much more advanced now than I was at that age. So what the survey said was, people are now saying, because they've seen their parents and they've seen other things happen, and they're like, look, I'm going to opt for not have this really expensive wedding, because weddings cost a lot, for instance, and they're saying, we're going to put our wedding off, or we're going to do a smaller wedding. We're going to save that money for a down payment on a home. I'm not going on vacation. And again, this is obviously pre-pandemic, so a lot of things have changed. I think a lot of people are opting out of spending money the way that they may have been spending it prior to the pandemic. But the survey said that the 18 to 23, 24-year-olds, we talked to quite a few people, they want to start thinking about home ownership sooner. Which I was like, I wish I was thinking about that. I could have been, I don't know about you, Cerita, we probably would have been on our 5th or 6th house by now. We could have had income coming in, right? I call it passive income. You're not doing it, it's kind of coming in. But people are really starting to think that way. And then also, if I had been smart enough at 25, you heard Cerita and I will talk about our careers. They're also saying, I think I want to work in a city. I want to buy a house or a condo or something in a city that if I change jobs 5 times, like I want to live in a specific market that's growing, that has, multiple employers that really align with my goals and my career, so they can kind of be, in maybe more urban areas or in the city versus in the suburbs. And so I think people are starting to make that turn. and not everyone, but I think people are starting to really, really think about it. Then I also think for their primary home, but I also think, younger people are starting to think about home ownership as an investment. Now, I don't know if you mentioned it, Selena, Cerita did around, you can live in the home and or could be your second home or your third home. And I think people are looking for ways to take control and have income come in and do something for themselves, small business owners in terms of going in with your family. Like I always wished, I don't know about you, Cerita, but if I could go backwards, I wish that my family, I wish we all sat around the table and said, let's go buy our family a vacation home.
Yeah.
Let's all chip in and let's buy a house wherever that may be, on what beach, whatever, or what cabin. And I wish we had thought about that, because people are doing that now. Because if you think about it, that would have been legacy, that would have been property, that would have been where, we think about our family reunions, and we all try to figure out where to go to family reunions and all that kind of stuff. If we had been thinking about that, or myself at a younger age with my cousins and family, when they were 25 and I was 25, just imagine the legacy we would have built. And so I encourage people now. I have older children, and I'm encouraging them more so. Even at my dinner table when they were growing up, we weren't talking about home ownership, and I had a home. And so I'm just encouraging them even more to think about how to save and be ready for home ownership. I love, Sarita, I always use the example of the purple wall. Like many people can't go paint a purple wall in an apartment that you're renting. But if you own a home, you can do a polka dot wall, a purple wall, you can grill in your backyard, you can do a lot of things. So I think it's a quality of life. Again, if I could do it all over again, Selena, I'd have made some different decisions. I'd have about 5 or 6 homes right now. Probably would be retired if I had done it at 25. I don't know about you, Cerita, but I probably would have been retired by now if I had done that earlier.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Selena, one thing I wanted to just say is that, sometimes like growing up, one of the things that we heard a lot of is it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And I think that is applicable here too, that we might not have started out the right way, but it's how we finish. And so, I always say that God is always interested in who we're becoming. And so when you think about this, especially when you think about home ownership or real estate, look, land is the one thing that God will not make any more of. And he tells us to possess it. And so when you think about this is an opportunity, especially when you're getting knowledge like this. Like I wish that there were podcasts and different forums where I could have gotten engaged in or made the decision to engage in some of those types of conversations so that I could learn more. But what I will say, and I know that this is true for AJ, true for myself, we might not have started on that path the way that we are talking about it now, but we got there. And here's an opportunity that you can take advantage of to get there sooner. And not just for your, making sure that your first home is your only home, but also getting into that first home where that first home can turn into real estate property or property that you own. And now you can start to rent it out and be able to receive some funding from properties that you're renting out so that you can have that second home, that third home, that vacation home. But there's so much investment and opportunity that's available in real estate today that, again, it would just not, it's not a missed opportunity. It's just an opportunity that was seized by someone that picked it up. And this is the opportunity that we have, is just to pick up the opportunity to grow and leverage real estate as that opportunity to build legacy wealth within our community.
Yeah. And, speaking of legacy wealth, AJ, I started this session by talking about some of the disparities when it comes to Black home ownership compared to white. And we know that Black home ownership has pretty much been decreasing since 2000 and between 2015 and 2019. What policies do you think need to be in place to help close the equity gap in home ownership? And what else can we do as a community to help close the gap? So hand in hand, we know government plays a role, but also what should we be doing as well?
Well, I think there's this the self-efficacy, the pieces that we've been talking about. Take control of yourself, right? Get educated. Also, if you think about the biggest barriers to home ownership in terms of what stops people, I talked about the reserves, down payments, and closing costs, but I think it's this whole debt. And then you managing your debt. Cerita mentioned it, pay your bills on time. So there's stuff we can do differently to get control of the situation. And there's so debt, managing your debt to income, debt to income. You have to be able to demonstrate your ability to repay. So you need to think about that. I think people are thinking differently about colleges because our largest debt in most cases are student loans. And so I think we've been kind of forced to do that, right? Most recently with the pandemic, people had to decide what school they were going to. Do they go virtually? Do they go face to face? Do they go someplace else their freshman year? All that kind of stuff in terms of younger people. So I think that we have to take some responsibility. The other thing that we do need help on is really housing in general. There is a housing shortage depending on what market you live in, and I'll call it affordable housing shortage. And it is important that we work with the community and CDFIs and others that are really trying to help with affordable housing. I know, again, both of our institutions are pretty passionate about housing and supporting housing, whether that's rental housing, right? So you can get into a more controlled, better environment to start saving to purchase a home. But it really, really, we need to work on housing in general. But I think the more you take control of your own situation, and then for us at my institution, we are focused on the whole education piece and partnering with strategic partners to do more and start to think about more community reinvestment, where you kind of go in and take an entire block. You know, we talked about refinancing a minute ago, right? So think about it this way. There are people that could refinance their homes today to get a lower rate. I think that's where Cerita was going, right? So you get to make an option of, do I get a lower rate in terms, meaning my APR, my house, I may be paying, I make it 5% or whatever. If you refinance your home, you could refinance it for less. So you could take those dollars that you were paying in your mortgage and use that money to sweep it into a savings or something. So you start to plan for the unplanned emergency. Or you refinance your house and you take the equity out and you use it to do whatever it is you need to do that may be an emergency. Well, if your house is not kept, if the house is not in a position to appraise at a value for you to take that equity out or have access to that equity out, it's a problem. And so that's why community reinvestment is important for organizations to really help when you go in communities and say, look, we're going to help with windows and we're going to help with doors. We're going to help do things with houses so that the houses are in a position, people are in a position then to refinance their home, to get a better rate, et cetera. So there's multiple ways that companies can help, the organizations can help, and I think we're all focused on the same thing. The only issue I think we have right now, even though we talked about flipping homes or people buying homes, is a lot of the properties that are affordable, people are coming and purchasing them and using them as investment property for Airbnbs and things like that. So that's actually taking away what I would call affordable housing, which is a challenge, which means you end up having to buy in a different place. That's why low down payment mortgages matter, 3% or less. Matter so you can get in the home. So I mean, there's lots of things that could be done. I know that there's consortiums and organizations that we partner with, trying to figure out how to do it. But I think us being in control somewhat of your own destiny, the largest kind of credit issue that's out there is debt to income. So I'm not talking about people who are unemployed based on the current pandemic and any of that situation. I'm just saying spending to a limit, or you can even go backwards to say just equal pay, right? And so employment, where are you employed? Are you getting paid appropriately? So it's bigger than, if you ever read The Color of Law or like there's a lot of books and stuff out there that tells you that it's going to take us a while to get out of the hole that we're in today. But I would just recommend people take control over what they can control. And then we need to continue to be responsible as financial institutions to be part of the solution. Cerita, I don't know if I missed anything that I know we've obviously spent a lot of time collectively and individually trying to figure out how to help people get out of the rut and get us to, I think the goal, if you talk to some organizations, we need to get to somewhere about 50-60% of Black home ownership sometime in the next couple of years. That would be a first milestone.
Yeah.
Do you foresee something like that happening in our lifetime, Cerita?
Oh, I do, and I paused a little bit because I think it starts with us. I think AJ hit on a couple of things from a policy perspective. Number one, it all starts with us, basically understanding and knowing what it is that we need and what we, and how we need to plan in order to get there. The second component is two biggest barriers, typically down payment assistance and closing cost assistance. And so that's cash on hand to be able to get into home ownership. The other thing that we also think about is credit and access to credit. And so we know that there are products and programs out there that enable us to be able to access credit or access homeownership by leveraging some of those programs that are, less than 3% down or, 3% down or something like that, where we would leverage those. But it's also important for us to make sure that, AJ talked about this too, taking care of our debt to income and understanding what that is. What is that ratio? What is my debt versus my income? Am I bringing in too much? Am I bringing in enough income to take care of my debt, so on and so forth, and making sure that we understand what that is. The other thing that's critically important is the thing that we all have the right to do, and it's exercising our right to vote and making sure that we understand what is the agenda when it comes to housing and homeownership in America. We need to make sure that we're paying attention to what our policymakers are talking about and what they're standing for. Sometimes we could be voting for people that are trying to take us straight out of the communities that we live in, right? By raising taxes and things of that nature. So we need to make sure that we understand what is the government's agenda when it comes to homeownership and housing. And then making sure that we vote and put the right policymakers in the positions so that they can stand for us and make decisions that are in our best behalf. We do a pretty good job from a lending perspective, working with policymakers, working across the industry, working with advocacy groups to try to think of different ways, different things that are necessary in order to increase African-American homeownership. And I can tell you the number one thing that we probably underestimate, that's confidence. It's just straight up confidence. Because when we see all the things going on around us, oftentimes we get stifled. We don't want to move. We pause. We take a step back, so on and so forth. Or we saw what happened to our mom and them and our grandparents and our cousins and how they might have gone through a foreclosure crisis or something like that. And we don't want to go through something like that. So we just stay on the fence around homeownership and we don't want to get involved. But we don't know the different individual situations that occurred in those particular circumstances. And so again, I would say that we have to instill confidence back in our community, and that comes through education.
Yes.
Full-fledged education around homeownership and what it takes. I often say, like with high school, we used to take home economics. They've taken that out of the school system. So we don't learn, how to take care of our, finances and so on and so forth in that particular space. But that's a huge opportunity. So I would just say that we just need to instill confidence back into our community. We need to educate ourselves around the things that are going on from a homeownership perspective. And we just need to exercise our full-fledged right to vote and make sure that we understand what the agendas are from a policy perspective so that we can make sure that we put the right people in office that are going to focus on those agenda items that mean us well.
Okay, well, that being said, thank you so much, Cerita and AJ, for sharing the insight and the knowledge and experience that you guys both have in home ownership and encouraging us all to do as much research as needed so that we can make better economical decisions for ourselves and the generations after us. We really, really appreciate your time today, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.